Strong is born in 1929, the year the stock market crashed and the Great Depression began. He grows up in Oak Lake, Manitoba, the eldest of 4 children. They live in extreme poverty.
My father had no steady job. He had to work very hard just to produce a bare subsistence living for us. One of my most vivid memories is freight trains going both ways, loaded with people. People sitting on the boxcars up on the top, and when the train stopped, they would come across to our house and to other houses that were wanting water, wanting food. And I remember thinking, what is wrong with the system? And maybe I could do something about it, you know?
Never being poor. I remember them saying that. He'd never be poor, right? Whatever he does, you know, because he saw the restrictions of being poor, and he realized that in order to do the things he wanted, he had to get some financial security, and he did.
At school in Oak Lake, young Maurice meets a man who becomes a major influence in his life. Principal Clarence Heapy is political, a left-winger, a supporter of the CCF, the forerunner of the NDP. He teaches his frustrated young student to think within a political framework.
He and my mother introduced me to the larger world, the world of literature, the world of other thinkers, you know.
Strong's mother, a cultivated and sensitive woman, suffers from chronic depression and is often in hospital. Her illness gives Maurice a sense of responsibility beyond his years.
How close was Maurice to his mother?
Extremely. Extremely. She once said to him, "Never stop learning, and you'll get to the top."
He makes his fortune in the Alberta oil and gas boom. By his mid-20s, he's a millionaire. He wants to be rich and independent, but also wants to champion social justice. To his parents' dismay, he drops out of school at 14. To earn a living, he works as a deckhand on ships. Eventually, he comes back to Oak Lake to finish high school, but now he has a dream.
And I read a newspaper that was sort of blowing in the wind, and it talked about Churchill and Roosevelt meeting in the Atlantic and deciding that after the war there would be a great new United Nations organization to ensure that the world would never again have to experience the tragedy of war. And I fixed on that and said, that's what I want to do eventually.
Strong gets his first real job at age 16. Driven by a sense of adventure and taste for travel, he goes north as a buyer of furs for the Hudson's Bay Company. Here, he makes a crucial connection. Bill Richardson is a prospector and a bit of an adventurer. Through his wife, Mary McCall, he's well connected in both the Toronto establishment and abroad. The Richardsons are charmed by the clever and ambitious young man. They introduce Strong to people who have connections at the UN.
I learned very early, though, I could never get any job by applying to the personnel department, because when they look at my resume, they will never be impressed. So I always was fortunate to get my jobs because somebody met me and was good enough to offer me opportunity.
Strong gets a job as a clerk at the headquarters of the United Nations in New York. Heady times for a boy of 17. Maurice Strong has an extraordinary capacity to make the most of his luck. After only a few months in New York, he meets David Rockefeller, the financial guru of the UN, son of John D. Rockefeller, who's made construction of the famous UN building possible. It's the beginning of a long friendship and a network of contacts and influence which today extends around the world. But Strong realizes that without a university degree or a personal fortune, he has no hope of rapidly climbing the ladder at the UN.
So I made a decision which was, okay, if I cannot get into the foreign aid business, if I cannot get into the business of helping humanity directly, perhaps I can do it indirectly if I go into business and I use business as a platform.
The plan works. Strong becomes a boy wonder in the world of business. In his early 20s, he gets a job at Dome Mines in Calgary. He's an excellent manager. He distinguishes himself for his innovative thinking and remarkable self-discipline. By age 25, he's the president. In 1950, he marries Pauline Williams, a student he met in Winnipeg. They will have 4 children. By the end of the 50s, his reputation and contacts lead him to Montreal. 2 years later, at 31, he becomes president of Power Corporation, a breeding ground for Canada's business and political elite.
Power Corp became a kind of foundation for political people who needed to practice in public, in small, organized fora. And very important politicians came through that system up to and including Pierre Trudeau. And so very quickly he was at the center, the political center of Canada.
Strong wins his spurs with the Liberal Party establishment. And once again, he makes powerful friends. Later, they will name him head of the External Aid Office of Canada, now CIDA. At the same time, Strong begins to build his own network of protégés, young men just graduated from major universities who dream of changing the world. He has an uncanny flair for discovering future leaders. Among them is a young lawyer, Paul Martin Jr.
I was a student and I got a job working for an oil and gas company that Maurice Strong was the president of in Western Canada. I went down to check the Calgary Stampede on a weekend with my truck, which I wasn't supposed to do. On the way back, I rolled the truck, had an accident. Maurice Strong found out about it and fired me. Fortunately, about 5 or 6 years later, he rehired me in a different job.
It's at Power Corporation that Strong gives young Paul Martin his first real job. To run the Australian division, he also hires Jim Wolfenson, today president of the World Bank.
Those early days in Power Corporation forged very strong friendships. These are not contracts. This is something that you feel in your heart. And there are a few people like that where when you're young you build the relationships and they just last. And Maurice is one of those relationships.
In a reversal of roles, Wolfenson later hires Strong as an advisor at the World Bank.
It is a great morning, eh? It's a beautiful morning.
Early morning in Red Square, Moscow. Another former protege is keeping Strong company on his morning walk. His Excellency John Ralston Saul, the writer, philosopher, and husband of the Governor-General of Canada. 30 years ago, when Pierre Trudeau appointed Strong to start Petro-Canada, Strong hired John Saul.
Well, thank you for seeing me.
For Maurice Strong, there is no such thing as a visit to Moscow without dropping in on Mikhail Gorbachev.
What a wonderful portrait.
Once ruler of the Soviet Union, he now runs his foundation, and he's great pals with Maurice Strong. They met 10 years ago through their concern for the environment.
Well, I am older than you, I believe.
Now they are both sponsors of the Earth Charter, a document inspired by the UN Charter of Human Rights, which promotes a world of justice, peace, and sustainable development.
We
used Maurice Strong a lot. It was very important to us to collaborate with this man.
Before they part, Gorbachev gives his friend Strong a gift. A glass saber, full of the same brandy that Stalin used to send Winston Churchill every week.
And it will be a very precious thing in my own memories, especially because...
But as Strong found out, it's not easy being both a businessman and an environmental activist.